We are living still, unfortunately, in the greediest generation in the history of this country. And these numbers right here prove it.
So, some sad news, as it just came out today that former MSNBC host and working class fighter Ed Schultz has died at the age of 64 from natural causes. Now, I think 64 is fairly young to die, so I'm not sure what the natural causes are, but I assume we're going to learn more as this story progresses. Now, in this video, I'm going to eventually show a couple clips from Ed Schultz doing some great work when he was at MSNBC. But first, I want to give you just sort of a short introduction if you aren't too familiar with Ed Schultz and his work history. So, Schultz, a local and national radio and television personality, got his start as a sports broadcaster for Fargo-Moorhead television stations in the early 1980s, including time as sports director at WDAY-TV. He eventually moved to talk radio, including WDAY Radio, dominating the local airwaves as a conservative firebrand in the 1990s. However, he later said his views changed and he became a Democrat. In 2004, Schultz took his radio show nationwide. Then in 2009, he moved to national television, becoming a primetime progressive voice on MSNBC. Schultz parted ways with MSNBC in 2015, starting his job at RT America in early 2016. Now, I only became more familiar with Ed Schultz during the last couple of years that he was at MSNBC. So that's when I really began to dive headfirst into American politics and try to figure out just what was going on in the country. And Ed Schultz was one of those clear voices that really stood up for the poor and the middle class and pushed progressive policies like universal health care that still to this day are not being presented as a realistic solution to healthcare in America. So I'm going to show you a clip on that. But first, I want to just share a couple tweets here from people that knew him, that worked with him, and their experience with him. So this from Sam Stein. Ed Schultz was incredibly kind to me when I was first doing TV on MSNBC. He had a complex personality, but was also remarkably generous. He used to do shows from clinics where doctors gave free healthcare to the indigent. No one else would do that. Rest in peace. And this from John Fugelsang. I appeared on the Ed Schultz MSNBC show many times, and he appeared on my show as well. He was always very kind to me, and he always fought for working Americans, including the ones who attacked him. He was truly someone who dedicated his success to the society that produced him. Now, clearly Ed Schultz had a very strong personality, and I think that's part of what made him so great, because he was willing to actually stand up and fight for what he believed in, even on national television. So the first clip I want to show you here is Ed Schultz back in 2011 discussing income inequality.
But folks, I'm not making this stuff up. This is where wage earners have been in this country for the last 30 years. This is what American workers have done in productivity in the last 30 years, an increase of 80%. And this is the red line. You ever wonder, is your kid going to be a red liner or a blue liner? If you're a working American and you believe in recycled Bush economic theory, no offense, but I think you need your head examined. The one percenters in the red line have hammered the Americans in the blue lines for 30 years. Republicans, I don't think they give a damn if you work 50, 60, or 70 hours a week to survive and pay the bills. Where have your bills gone in the last 30 years? We are living still, unfortunately, in the greediest generation in the history of this country. And these numbers right here prove it. The top 1% were, now think about this. If the top 1%, if they were the job creators, based on what this is right here, hell, we ought to have record employment, not record unemployment. You see, they've been lying to us for years about how the job creators are going to reinvest their tax dollars back into the economy.
Now, that's just a short clip from a larger 15-minute segment. 15 minutes in depth on income inequality and presenting it in a way that is digestible to a larger audience. Does MSNBC do this today? If they do, I don't see it. And at the end of that segment, he actually brings on Bernie Sanders. And this is back in 2011 when Bernie Sanders was getting essentially no screen time. But Ed Schultz was able to recognize that Bernie Sanders is a politician that actually speaks to working class Americans. So if you want to watch that full clip, I'm going to link to it below my video, and you can check it out there. So let's go to the next clip here, and this is on healthcare. So this is back in 2009, and look what Ed Schultz is saying about healthcare.
I want to start with a story tonight that I think deserves a heck of a lot more attention. Is single payer on the table or is it off the table? Healthcare professionals want to know. I want to know. Americans all over the country are asking the same question. Now, earlier this week, and I think this is a travesty, the Senate Finance Committee, chaired by Max Baucus, held a hearing on healthcare reform. All players were there at the table except advocates for single payer. Now, folks, I'm not talking about the Code Pink crowd. I'm talking about doctors, nurses, lawyers, professional people who want and live it and need real reform. Now, the key is they had no seat at the table. The word is excluded, and I want to know why. Insurance companies, HMOs, pharmaceutical companies, hey, they were there.
What kind of democracy is it when you pay to play? When you take millions from your people, you're not going to give money to your corporate donors and not provide health care to all? What kind of Senate is this? Is this the Blagojevich Senate? Are you the Blagojevich chairman? We need single payer on the table now.
Now, folks, I'm not a big protester, and I don't advocate going out and getting arrested. But I think this demonstrates the undercurrent in America when educated professional people stand up for their beliefs and are excluded. Now, let me explain single payer for just a minute. The money comes from one source, the government. Now, you and I pay taxes, okay? The government pays the bills. It's that simple. Patients are not caught in the middle between doctors and insurance companies. No game plan here. There's no middleman, you know? There's no decision makers between you and your doctor. It's a clean deal. So what Chairman Baucus has decided, this option cannot be part of the discussion at a Senate hearing. I think that's wrong. I don't think it's fair. I think it's certainly not democracy at work. You know, and I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. These people, these professionals deserve to be heard.
What a great segment. That was 2009. And again, this is just a clip from a larger segment that I'll link to below my video. So this is Ed Schultz talking about universal health care back in 2009, pushing the idea that we should be discussing a single-payer system. It shouldn't just be about Obamacare, which is a private insurance-based system, but actually single-payer should be at the table. We should be discussing that. So this is a discussion that isn't even happening today. This is 9 years ago. And where is the discussion today on this issue? So when healthcare is brought up, it's always about, oh, but Medicare for all, how can we pay for that? It's never a segment like this, where the host is actually selling how a single-payer system, how a Medicare for all system might work and should work in the country, or should, at the very least, be in the debate. So everything about that segment is great. He covers a progressive protest in a positive way. Again, these are things that just don't happen today on MSNBC. Now, Ed Schultz, it's unfortunate that MSNBC let him go after he fought back against the TPP and was a Bernie Sanders supporter. And I did a story on that, how after leaving MSNBC, Ed Schultz discussed why or how MSNBC controlled the narrative and how they wouldn't let him cover Bernie Sanders announcing his candidacy for president. So it's unfortunate that Ed Schultz was eventually held back in terms of what he was allowed to cover. But when he was allowed to go and go off on topics like healthcare and income inequality, he went there. He went farther than any host even does today. And I think it's commendable. So Ed Schultz, it's sad you're gone, but at least we have clips like this and a memory of someone who clearly fought for real people.